Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be sharing how I made this Scooby-Doo blanket. This blanket I made a few years ago for a friend of mine. So I'll be walking through how I began this project, some improv I did, and some of the things that didn't go as planned. So stick around if you're curious and want to make your own Scooby-Doo blanket or a very similar project. As a reminder, make sure to hit that subscribe button just down below and the little bell icon next to it. That'll help you be notified every time I post new videos, and that way you will never miss out on all my new content I have coming. Also, check out down below in the description. I'll have affiliated links for a lot of the things that you'll be able to use to make this project. So I'll have yarn and supplies and crochet things. All that will be linked down below. If you purchase anything from those links, it'll help me and it'll help support me on this channel to be able to provide this kind of content for you guys. So the story behind this blanket was a long time coming. When I first began crocheting, I really wanted to make something for a friend of mine. She was a huge Scooby-Doo lover, and at the time, we're talking probably around COVID, almost, not quite, and she had gifted me something at Christmas time, and I wanted to do something really big for her, but my skill level at the time was very minimal, and also crocheting patterns were really hard to come by, especially when it came to amigurumi and things like that. Well, now flash forward, now that I've done some more crocheting, I've been crocheting for quite some time, I really was like, okay, I gotta crochet something Scooby-Doo related. At this point, I had already crocheted a few blankets, and so I was like, well, I bet I could crochet her a blanket now that I have been crocheting for some time. So right after one of our hangouts, it had occurred to me, I'm like, okay, I gotta make this blanket, I gotta plan this all out, gotta get the yarn, all the whole shebang. So I was looking on Pinterest, I typed in Scooby-Doo blankets, and of course, with Pinterest, you get 1,000 ideas. So I was looking at a bunch of different things. I'm bigger on doing more of the grafghans. I know it's another word, but I basically use a graph and I do single crochet and just follow the graph that way. So I looked at a whole bunch of ideas. So I'll share a couple of the ideas. The first idea I looked at was doing maybe a Christmas themed Scooby-Doo, because usually me and her will do our Christmases and we'll gift each other things. And so I thought maybe this would be a great way to gift it for Christmas. But I didn't like having to do so much detail because I have done grafghans in the past with lots of detail, and I was like, I do not want to make this extremely complicated. And so I'm like, this may not be the best thing. It also, I wanted it to be a blanket that she could have displayed all year if she wanted to. I mean, she's a huge Scooby-Doo lover, so I didn't want to limit it to a specific holiday. So I kind of had to scratch that one out, as cute as it was with the little wreath and all that. The next one I had seen was just an entirely brown, where you just kind of saw his face, which it would have been simple to do it that way, but it just wasn't getting me excited. Like, it was fine, but it just didn't seem like something I wanted to gift that way as a blanket. And then there was this other one here, which was a little more the direction I was trying to go, but it was more corner to corner focused, and I hadn't done corner to corner yet, and so I wasn't sure how I wanted to go about doing that. And then again, here's another one where it showed Scooby-Doo and the gang also corner to corner. That one could have been fun, but again, that was going kind of towards the direction where I didn't want a lot of detail, because it meant I would have to buy a bunch of different colors of yarn and switch between lots of colors. So I really was trying to avoid that with this project. So that wasn't going to work for me. But as much as I really wanted to go that direction, I was really trying to be mindful, because I was also going to be making another blanket that year. So I was trying to be very mindful of what I was about to sign myself up for, because I have been very bad about that in the past. So in the end, I did find this one where it seemed very simple. It just showed his head. Yes, there was a bit of different colors, but it looked pretty simple, where I just did his face. You know, there's a few colors here and there, and then I could just choose a solid background. And I'm like, this is perfect. So I was like, I feel like I could really work with this. And so what I did, because I have to be able to mark my squares when I'm working along. So what I did is I took some graph paper. So I keep a lot of graph paper on hand. So I took some graph paper. I have lots of graph paper like this. Some are bigger squares, smaller squares. So the ones I have here are on a smaller scale because this was going to be a huge thing. I unfortunately do not have my graph anymore. I think I misplaced it, or I might have decided to throw it away because it was a one-time thing that I was planning on making this. So sorry guys, if I happen to find it later, maybe I'll tag the video in the description or something. But you gotta do what you gotta do. I'm not the most organized person in the world, so if it's gone, it's gone. But I ended up just counting in the graph, and I'll have all of those ones I just showed, all those pictures, I'll have them all linked down below. So if you guys were interested in any of those specific pictures that you're wanting to do for a blanket or something, I'll have them all linked down below. And so you can do the same process for what I'm about to show you, or you could do it completely different where you just print it out. But at the time I didn't want to print it, I just drew it out myself. Maybe that was crazy. Oh well, it worked for me. I have learned a better technique, so if you don't want to draw it all out, if you happen to have a tablet, at the time I was not using a tablet, but I have now been using tablets to do graphicans like this because this makes this concept a lot easier on a bigger scale. But if you don't have a tablet and you would prefer to mark it, you can sit down and sketch it out. So figure out how many squares one way and how many squares the other way, and then just kind of follow in the graph is the best way to put that, if that makes any sense. And then I kind of color code it and whatnot. So is that pretty involved? Probably, but it is what makes it easy for me when you go about doing the whole thing, because I know I don't have anything drawn on this, but when you're going along, I mean, each square is going to be a stitch. So it is nice to be able to cross off when you've done a row. That's why I like to be able to have a physical copy. You can also, like I said, do it on a tablet and have it in a program and cross it off that way. Because then if it's something so big like this, where it can get pretty involved and it can be time consuming just drawing it out. In this case, it wasn't super bad drawing it out because all I was doing was just him. I didn't do the background because I knew what was going to be the background. I already had that established. So just a suggestion, if you guys are wanting to have an idea of what I did, that's what I did. Doing that wasn't so bad. Like I was saying, I tried to set myself up with a color pattern that wasn't like 50 different colors. I mean, literally we were using the brown, there was white a little bit with his eyes, you know, the pink. I mean, it was all pretty much brown and black at times, and then the green. So it really wasn't too involved. Now, the one thing that was kind of involved when it came to the colors, so for my yarn, majority of it was acrylic yarn. I used, the background was spring green with red heart. And then I know I'm big when it comes to acrylic, using usually Walmart if I can't get the red heart. So I think the black was probably Walmart's brand. And then the pink was probably red heart. And then the color that I had for his collar actually was really hard to find. The typical red heart or acrylic. I believe I had to go to Michael's to get this. And it was Loops and Thread Impeccable Acrylic. And this is in, oh, we got a fun number here. So we have color number 01201. So that's not very helpful. Okay, here we go. Turquoise, aqua. So that's actually what I ended up using. Because I really wanted it to match. And as far as I understood from my memory, because again, this was a couple years ago, we were looking, me and my husband, we were looking at yarn. And we looked at, I think we went to several places just trying to find something that would actually match. I think at the time we still had Joann's. And we went to Walmart. Walmart didn't have any because that's where my red heart and acrylic is. And this was the only place that we were able to find where it's like, yeah, that looks like his collar. So that was the only place that we could get it. So if you're wanting to do, and you're trying to find the right color for his collar, this is what I used. And I ended up buying like 2 of these and hardly even used because it wasn't that much. But if you're a crocheter and you know anything about when you're making a project, always make sure you have at least one extra just in case, because you just never know. And in this case, I ended up needing more, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So after I had finished doing just the graph part, I was very surprised to realize that the blanket was a lot smaller than I expected. I'd have to look and see what the actual numbers of stitches by stitch, because in my mind I thought, oh, this will be plenty. And then when I was done, I'm like, this is a really small blanket. I'm not a huge fan of how small this turned out. And so I was like, well, what can I do now that I've already done all this work and it's done? You know, what can I do to make this bigger? And the first thought is maybe I'll add a border. And I got to thinking, okay, what kind of border could I add? And I couldn't stop thinking of just the way Scooby-Doo vibes. You know, that groovy, you know, the mystery machine has the little flowers on it. And I was like, you know what? I bet I could do kind of a 70s groovy vibe with adding flowers around. And so I remember seeing somewhere, you know, just online, I'd seen that people have done like granny square type things with retro looking flowers. So I was like, perfect, we'll do this. And so I found the pattern. I was probably following a tutorial and was starting to go along and making this. And then realizing, as great as this pattern was, it was not going to work with this blanket because my blanket was going to be front and back. So you were going to be able to see the image on both sides. I wasn't going to be putting a backing on my blanket or covering or hiding anything. It was going to be the exact same on both sides. So I'm like, well, this pattern that I'm following is not the same on both sides. You could kind of, I don't remember exactly, but the technique of to make the flower like that, it didn't show, like it was, I can't even remember, kind of webby, where you could see where your things are carrying over and where your things are popping up, and it just was not going to work. And the only way that that would have worked is if I were to make two of the granny squares, and it would just been too bulky. It just wouldn't have worked. And I was kind of disappointed because I thought this was going to be such an easy way to do this and make this work. It just didn't. So there was my first fail on that. It just, not necessarily a fail, it just was a roadblock. And so my next idea was like, well, that's not going to work. What else can I do? And so my next thought process was, well, I have these squares, you know, that I'm planning on doing anyway. Like these were the squares I was thinking about doing, you know, to do my little blocks. And so I was like, okay, I have this square. Why don't I just, you know, I'm using my brain here. It's a grid technically. So why don't I just try and make the same thing with the Scooby-Doo where I used a grid to make it? Why don't I just make a flower, sketch out how big I want the square to be, and do it just the same way with the color change? And so I did that and I roughed it out and I was like, this is perfect. And then I started doing it on the actual square and it was a little boxy, as you can see here. It just wasn't as pretty in my grid. I don't know why. And I knew, like, when I sketched it out, I tweaked it, tried to see if it would fix it, and it just wasn't going to work. It was going to be too boxy with how big I had to do the squares. Because I had already sat down making a bunch of these squares in order to know how many needed to fit. And I'm trying to remember, like, I was sitting here trying to count. I couldn't find my notes for this. But I'm guessing from what I did is I probably did about 15 rows here. And then I believe it was about 16 stitches. So you probably will chain 17 and then just single crochet about 15 rows and then single crochet all the way around one time. But I did have to make the corners of my blanket, I think, slightly bigger. So if you're going to go this route, you may have to tweak and just kind of figure it out. I had to kind of make a few and then kind of lay them all the way around to kind of have an idea of how many of these would actually work. So that was another thing, is just because I had tried to make the flower work with the size that I had to be able to work with, it just wasn't going to work. And I didn't want to do them too small because the smaller you do, it just looks funky. And if you make anything too big, it looks weird too. So it just wasn't working that route. So that was another roadblock. I was like, well, that's not going to work because it just wasn't looking like a flower. It looked a little too boxy for me. So by my third attempt of attempting to figure out what to do for my flower border, I guess I went online. I was just trying to search, okay, what else is there? There's got to be something similar. And lo and behold, I found on YouTube a video that someone had done a flower more of what I was wanting to do. It was just a flower by itself. And the link for that flower video that I found here on YouTube, I'll have that link down below. So if you guys are curious on how to do that and how to make those flowers just for another project or for this exact project, it'll be linked down below to be able to help you guys with that. So I had to bake the flower and then attach it onto the square. And so that's what I ended up doing. So I figured out how many squares I was going to do. I figured out, okay, how many squares are there? All right, so then what my colors I'm going to do, you know, what colors are the Scooby-Doo thing. And so I did all that, figured out, okay, how am I going to fit? You know, I have all the pattern of, okay, I decided to do that turquoise color that I had mentioned, where it's like, oh, I only needed it for the collar, but it's like, no, I could do the flowers. So I did the corners with that, and then I had some orange and some purple that were perfect for the combination as well. And so I just kind of laid everything out and figured out, okay, how many of these can I make it look? And I did the sides different than the top and the bottom. And eventually it worked out, but I did that on both sides. So I made double the flowers, and that way it could be the same on both sides. So was that probably crazy? Yes, but did I love the outcome? Of course, that's why we did it. So just because there's roadblocks doesn't always mean that it's the end of the world. It ended up being so much better than what I thought it would have been. Not to say that those other ways wouldn't have worked. I was going for a specific approach, and that's why I was going through this whole thing, is because I wanted a specific ending and product, and those other attempts just weren't giving me that. But when I got to doing my actual flower part, to help me keep track, because I had like a bunch of squares that were just like this, and I believe I took a bunch of little safety pins, wrote little scraps of paper to tell me which one was which, because in the process of sewing on both sides and just keeping everything, and I think I even numbered everything too at some point, to know, okay, this is your place, starting from one corner all the way around my entire blanket, to help me keep track, because I had laid everything out so many times to help me just, okay, this is where this goes, because once you take everything away and you're working on it, then you're, crap, where did that go again? So I was taking lots of notes and helping myself keep track by just pinning on every single one. And that way I knew when I was done and everything was okay, now where does this go? And you know, all that. And some funny little stories to go along with this blanket is, as I was making it, my dog was just kind of a huge fan of my blanket, because a couple times while I was laying it out and working with it, I'd turn around and she'd be laying right next to it or laying kind of on it. And I always thought my dog kind of reminded me of Scooby-Doo, just a little bit, just the color and just kind of her overall look. And so I kind of thought it was so cute and appropriate that she was so drawn to the blanket while I was making it. So this blanket did take me quite a bit of time to do, obviously. I believe I started working on it about February of the year that I worked on it. I can't remember if it was, I think it was 24. And I worked on it for a little bit, and then, like I said, I finished the blanket probably a month or two, probably about April-ish. And then came with a little bit of a roadblock where I was having issues with the border. So I took a little break because I had a few other projects. I had time-sensitive things to work on. So I took a break because I didn't need to have this blanket done till Christmas. So I took a little break from it and then jumped back on it towards probably like September, October time. I know I was crunching a little bit because I had put it to the side for a bit and got distracted with other things. But this was definitely a very time-consuming project, and I will say that it probably took me an entire year, because it did take me a majority of the year to complete it, but I did not consecutively work on it throughout the whole year. So this was not an easy project, and it was not an overnight thing. Now, I can understand that after me talking about how I did this, can be extremely intimidating if you're still new to crochet or you're a little unfamiliar with a lot of how I went about doing it, and it could be very intimidating to do exactly what I did. So you could do a much simpler approach. You could try doing the flower that I said was more boxy if you want. Like, I wouldn't see that being a problem, especially as a beginner, because it still gives you a flower look. I just wanted more. Another thing I saw while I was trying to find the pictures that I did is I did find that somebody took granny squares instead, and you don't have to use the same colors, but you could even try finding more floral granny squares if you want. So there's lots that are more flowery looking. That could work as well. Or you can take even just the colors of what I did. So do like pink, or not pink, do purple or turquoise or orange, and that would kind of give it more of that flower. Like, you don't have to do the whole thing, but like maybe do like one of the rows a different color. Or like I said, try and find one that's actually a flower granny square, and that could be a lot nicer and easier without it being quite as complicated, because there's lots of tutorials here on YouTube. If I happen to find any, I will maybe link some down below to help you guys get a direction on how to do all that. And as a little bonus footage, I have a small clip of the reveal of when I gifted this to my friend. She has approved and said that this clip can be shared with you guys. So here's just a little segment of her reaction of when she received the blanket.
It's Scooby-Doo! Oh my goodness! Oh my gosh, I love this! Thank you!
You're welcome.
Oh my goodness! Sorry. Oh, thank you so much!
You're welcome.
I love it. Thank you.
I'm glad you love
so
it.
much! like the flowers. Like, you know, like the mystery machine,
Yep.
like the colors.
Yep.
I was like, oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, this is great. I love seeing your reaction.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was inspiring and helpful for you guys, that you guys can make your own Scooby-Doo blankets or very similar Grafkins if you're trying to get into that category, or if you're just like me where you're trying to make a project and you need to come with an alternative of creating a border. I hope that this was able to help you guys in that aspect. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it. That way you'll know every time I post a new video. And as always, happy crafting and keep creating beautiful things. Until next time, everyone. Bye.